Hi, everyone. Welcome to the first Helix reading event. My name is Anna Cristiano. I'm the editorial director of the magazine, and I'm just going to give a little rundown of what we're doing tonight, which first and foremost is celebrating the last year of the Helix. We'll have poetry, fiction, and nonfiction readings by 2021 Helix contributors, students from our home institution of Central Connecticut State University, and the 2021 winner of our poetry contest honoring the late Leslie McGrath, Barb Fulton Jennes. At the end of the program, I'll have some more information about the 2022 contest and the Spring Helix issue, so stick around for that. But now I'll turn things over to our poetry editor, Noe San, to kick off the readings.
Hi, everyone. Like Anna said, my name is Noe. I'm the poetry editor for the Helix Magazine. And to begin the evening, we're going to begin with our poetry category. And first we have Kelly Blackstone reading her untitled poem.
I learned the word broken in the middle of the night. Your back was against my chest, naked, your glasses discarded, groped for in the morning, your ear to the bed. You were all good hearing. You heard it coming. You heard it coming. The end of my residence in New England. The end of my residence here. The end, the end, the end of us.
Yeah, feel free to type praises, claps, snaps in the group, in the chat, as much as you want to celebrate these poets. Our next poet is Craig Cotter reading his piece, Bungalow Heaven.
Hello, am I on okay? Thanks to the editors of Helix for your interest in my work. My poem's called Bungalow Heaven. I live in Pasadena, California, and Bungalow Heaven is a historic neighborhood that was created in 1989 to save about 800 homes that are built between 1878 and 1924, and they're mostly California bungalows or craftsmen. I don't live there. I walk through there. I can't afford that neighborhood. But here we go. Bungalow Heaven. Yesterday, when we walked through Bungalow Heaven, saying many of the same things we often say of the houses we like and don't like, houses we'll likely never have. I'm so happy we've been together these 13 years. Even though most days we want more, most of the last 13 years have been enough, and more than enough, as we've seen Skid Row in LA and the slums of Bangkok together. And that poem is also for Janice Prajimnark. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Craig. Our next poet is a fellow member of the Helix magazine. She's very lovely. And this is Madison Culpepper reading her poem, I Cried Over a Boy.
Hello. Before I left, he wrapped his arms around me like time didn't exist. It was just us in a blur of young love, lost in each other's pastel embrace. His warmth sunk into my bones, and I couldn't say goodbye. Letting go, even for 7 days, left my heart with torment. The last sight of his brown eyes, as I shut the car door, made the steering wheel go cold under my palms. But his silhouette walking inside made it harder to drive away. I didn't want to go home for days without his crisp voice, the way his cheeks just rose as he chuckles over my giggle. I craved him and our cotton candy love. I approached a stoplight, sobbed into the steering wheel, wanting to go back to the time when I was in his arms and each thought drifted away. Every time I left his house, a part of my heart was forgotten. I kept leaving my love there and drove away in tears. I was lost in the thoughts of him beside me, trying to mess with the radio. I remembered us driving together, his hand resting on my leg, and we laughed as if we didn't only meet 8 years ago. We've always known each other. I gripped the steering wheel as tears cradled my eyes. I miss him. I miss him. I can still smell him in my clothes, feel his arms around me, his candy aroma trapped in the car seats. But he isn't here. I'm driving home alone. Thank you.
Thank you, Madison. Thank you. Very, very, very lovely. And for the last of the poetry section, we have the amazing first place winner of the 2021 Leslie McGrath Poetry Prize, Barb Fulton Jennes, reading her lovely poem From the Room of an Unknown Girl.
Hi, everyone. I'm enjoying the poems so far, and I'm really looking forward to hearing some more of the student work. This poem is based on a true story, something that really happened when I was quite young, and I'm happy to read it for you. From the Room of an Unknown Girl. We were told to take anything we wanted from the chattel left behind by a disappeared family who had rented my aunt's farmhouse. They left in a hurry, unable to pay the month's due, unwilling to beg my hard-nosed aunt for more time. The man had killed a son who stepped in to fetch a can blasted by buckshot during a drunken round of target shooting. The wife had no teeth and stank. Good riddance was Aunt Flo's assessment. But I felt sorry for them, especially the girl whose tiny bedroom reeked of wet plaster, water-yellowed wallpaper flayed like skin. A tattered quilt of calico yo-yos promised pitiable warmth to the room. There, atop a listing chest of drawers, I saw my prize, a cheap snow globe filled with water and wonder. Inside, 2 skaters, a top-hatted man in long button coat and a woman clad in fur-trimmed finery, coat, bonnet, muff. Shaken, the globe filled with a whirling squall from which the skaters slowly emerged, the man's sure hand still guiding his companion through a circle of frosted eternity. Raised in a house of clamor and clout, I longed to glide in that world of gentle hands and hushed lips, to meet the absent girl there in silence, away from the fury that shook both of our worlds. I took the snow globe with me and coddled its fragility for years until I forgot how. Thank you.
Beautiful, 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 beautiful. Thank you, Barb. Thank you to all the poets who shared their pieces with us tonight. Immensely grateful. Our next section will be the nonfiction section. And we're going to begin with Caitlin Upshaw reading her piece, Onion Tears.
Back when we are still buying minutes for cell phones and saving our allowances to afford emojis, my mother suggests that I get a job at the local grocery store. Feeling myself above this due to an inflated ego commonly found in 16-year-olds, I decide instead to volunteer more at my church and avoid the retail circuit altogether. I tell my mother this will look really good on scholarships and begin working in the nursery. Within a few months, I have become a master at avoiding actual church services and start to smell like Cheerios and talcum powder. Onion stem provides support to the plant, tunic, the outer layer of an onion, its skin. 6th grade begins and the family of a girl killed at Columbine come to talk to us about school shootings. We sit in a dank gymnasium on the floor, the bleachers reserved for 8th graders, paying some attention to the speakers. When we're sent back to our classes, it is with this message: make friends with the outsiders. But this is middle school. We are all the outsiders. On Sunday, I attend church with my mother, the assembly burrowing its way out of my mind. My church was built over a century ago, but the most antiquated thing inside of it is the collection of toys in the nursery, most of them purchased at garage sales and thrift stores. When I retrieve toys from the higher shelves, I brush off dust before handing them down to grubby little hands. The children do not discriminate between the clean and dirty toys, so I make laps around the room with the disinfectant spray in hand. Scale leaves, found around the onion, provide protection against water loss. In 8th grade, 10 minutes before school ends, we go into a lockdown. We sit in our history classroom with the lights turned off and a chair against the door, laughing and whispering in hushed tones. Our teacher taps her foot nervously and hisses at us to shut up. We do not understand why. This is just a drill. We have them every few months. I roll my eyes and continue talking to my best friend, leaning into her shoulder and whispering as quietly as I can directly into her ear. When she laughs, I hold a textbook in front of her face so the sound is muffled and we can both avoid detention. When we are released 45 minutes later, there is a police barricade in the street and my mother is waiting for me on the other side of it. We find out that a kid that no one knows brought his father's gun to school to trade for another kid's Nintendo DS. On the car ride home, I laugh and make jokes about how stupid he must have been. I tell my mother that I have a Game Boy Advanced and I wouldn't mind adding a Nintendo DS to my Christmas list. I'm not saying I understand why he did it, but I get it. My mother grips the steering wheel with one hand and my knee with the other. I do not understand why she is frightened. We have been kind to the outsiders. We have nothing to fear. Bud, the heart of an onion. The strangest toy in the nursery is a plush onion, fully anthropomorphic with wide eyes, arched eyebrows, and a single tear sewn onto his cheek. I know it's supposed to be a male onion because it has no eyelashes and the female toys do. There is a plush knife in his plush back, and I decide that this must be an analogy for how we all cry when we're cutting onions but do not think about them crying as well. When the children ask me what the toy is supposed to be, I tell them that it is a type of shark and the knife is a fin. I challenge them to imagine it swimming and they drag it across the blue carpet pretending it's a sea monster as only 4-year-olds could do. When one of the children is excluded from the game, I remind them this is a big ocean and there is room for everyone. Basal plate, fleshy stem where new organs grow on the plant. In 11th grade, we decide that we are the generation of skeptical news consumers. The most rebellious of my generation deem themselves apolitical, which seems wonderful and is impossible in the same breath. The news breaks at 1 o'clock, but I don't believe it until the smart kids begin to talk about it as well. By 1:30, now in our last class of the day, all of us take turns pulling out our phones. We look at local news sites first and then national ones. I watch my prepaid minutes dropping down in decimals as I try to type beneath my desk and keep my eyes on the whiteboard. 7777266639999, 4466666665, 7777222446666665555, Sandy Hook School. In the time that it takes my phone to load a news website, I distract myself by thinking of the name of the school, all I have heard through whispers so far. Our high school's mascot is a ram, so I imagine the school in Connecticut has a mascot named Sandy, that maybe she's a bear or a rabbit or a Connecticut bird. I'm sure they have to have a bird of some kind. Every state has a bird. When the website loads, it does so with bright red letters at the top, breaking. My classmates echo a chorus of gasps in the back row as we read the word elementary and realize that these are children. We're children. The teachers find out and soon finish their lesson plans. No one knows what to say. No one says anything. It will be years before I hold a gun, but I understand even then that a silencer does nothing to lessen the damage from a bullet. Root tethers the onion to the earth, keeps it alive. I don't remember getting into my car after the final bell rings, but I remember driving. I remember cradling the cell phone in my hand, web page still open, refreshing it at every stoplight and watching my prepaid minutes dwindle. I walk past the sanctuary, past peering eyes in the church office and into the nursery. I turn on the lights and then turn them back off like this is a drill. I am in an ocean and I do not need light to see where I am going. I am in a classroom and I cannot go anywhere, so I keep the lights off. I sink to the floor beneath 2 cribs and grab the nearest toy, weep into the stuffed onion as my fingers continue to refresh the page and the casualty number rises. After a while, I convince myself that I'm causing this by clicking refresh, so I drop the phone. I do not leave the room for an hour. When I do, I try to pull the knife out of the onion's back, but it will not budge. So I tell the onion that I love him. I tell him that he did nothing wrong. He could not have been kinder. He did not deserve this. Thank you.
Absolutely beautiful. Thank you very much, Caitlin, for sharing that with us. Our Our next nonfiction reader is Julia Warnock, reading her Letter to a Stranger, to the guy who gave a lap dance at Emily and Mark's wedding.
Letter to a Stranger, to the guy who gave a lap dance at Emily and Mark's wedding. The reception started at noon. It was held in a traditional Italian banquet hall that's a century behind the rest of the businesses in that section of Southington. The inside reeked of funeral and cigarettes, decade of Marlboro smoke residue seeping out of the red carpet with rows of crisscrossing gold stripes. The decor had been updated since the 70s, though the bottom of the walls are still lined with horizontal wooden planks, and the top half, a mute brown, looks like painted over wallpaper. I imagine the only other time the room is used is for mafia meetings, where they chain smoke, eat pasta, and decide who to murder next, or whatever it is they talk about. 20 tables form the shape of a U around the dance floor that fills the middle. A short rectangular table and 2 white throne chairs sit at the front of the room, occupied by Emily and her new husband, Mark. The light streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows behind the head table hurts my eyes, foreshadowing the coming headache from taking one too many trips to the bar. I'm at table 18, back of the room. The clutter that sat on the table, 3 plates, 2 forks, coffee cup, champagne glass, got cleared after lunch, and the only thing left is a white tablecloth, speckled with red dots of marinara, and a half-dead flower arrangement sitting on top of a sea green cloth napkin. The ego-deflated guests of table 18 had long since passed the "how do you know the bride" chatter, and now resigned to keep the dull filler conversation to a minimum. An uncomfortable silence falls upon the table, though no one dares to break it. I people watch instead. Uncoordinated white people fill the dance floor as runaround soup blasts through the speakers, and I watch amusedly, laughing at their offbeat movements, admitting to myself I'd probably be no better. I think about getting up to dance briefly, but the reality that over 100 people would be watching me keeps me planted in my seat. Don't flatter yourself, my mother would say. No one's paying attention to you. A tad self-important of me, I admit, but anticipating the burn of eyes on my body leaves me a jealous spectator regardless. You're at table 2, one of the tables reserved for the bridal party. Your black tux matches the rest of them too, but I don't remember seeing you walk down the aisle. It's clear you've given up on maintaining any sense of formality, as your jacket is hung around the back of your chair, a bright turquoise vest layered on top, and your off-white button-down comes slightly more untucked as you gesture your arms wildly while telling a story, but you don't bother shoving it back in. The drink in your hand is bright yellow. You look like you drink something fruity, drinks with tiny umbrellas and skews of tropical melon. And even though the hyper-masculine bros at your table shit on you for drinking something other than a double IPA, you don't seem like you care. The shrill scream of a woman pulls me back to the dance floor. She readjusts her knee-length dress and clutches the bride's bouquet in her left hand. Putting her matching black heels back on, she looks excitedly in the direction of a man at table 9. You put down your drink and drag a chair out to meet the woman, delicately nudging her to take a seat. It's about to get freaky in here, Tony, I decide to name the aggressively Italian DJ, tells the room. The beginning thuds to Genuine's Pony flood through the speakers. You pull the rest of your semi-untucked shirt out of your pants and undo the top couple of buttons. Throwing your hands on the back of the chair, you stand with one leg on either side of hers and thrust your hips with the same lack of rhythm the other guests suffer with. The woman in the chair desperately avoids making eye contact with any part of your body as you stand directly in front of her, hips rolling back and forth, and she grips the bouquet with all her might. Moving back a few steps, you raise your arm in the air, spread your legs a tad wider, and slowly drop closer and closer to the floor with each beat of the song. You make your way back up with a smile and flip around to face the room. You're singing along as you dance, telling the audience that your saddle's waiting. The front half of the room, friends, close family, claps along. Loud whoops come from your table. The back half, guests invited only due to familial obligation, watch with shocked expressions, gasping in horror as you dance. I catch your eyes for a second, and the brightness in them electrocutes me. You look so alive. You smile at me before turning back, finishing your performance by spinning around to face the woman and giving her one last hip thrust. For 21 years, I've chosen to drag my self-consciousness along with me as a shield against doing anything stupid, like giving a lap dance to a stranger in front of 100 different strangers. I'd never questioned it nor evaluated why I wouldn't let it go. Until that day. You didn't care that you couldn't dance or sing. You didn't care that people could see you. You wanted them to see you. You let go of the bullshit people spend our whole lives telling us we're not supposed to do, think, or be. We waste so much time following the de facto laws other people place upon us. So much life. And I'm ready to stop wasting mine. I'm ready to dance at weddings. I'll have to work myself up to lap dances, but, as my mother would say, a little public flattery never hurts.
So, thank you, Julia. Thank you so much. That was beautiful. We're going to move to fiction now. And to start us off with that, we're going to have a piece by Danny Contreras, a story about a grandmother.
Thank you. My grandmother chanted in strange tongues from the dilapidated shack behind the house. She was giving life to the couple who traveled from San Juan. She was a curandera, a healer, a fighter of evil spirits, one who spoke for the higher being, and through their will, gave life. That's what she told me. 8 years ago, when I was 9 years old, my grandmother took me with her to the home of Pedro and Filomena Jimenez in the south of Ponce across town for an emergency. She drove a 1968 Impala, a relatively new car in 1975, and perfect to go anywhere you wanted fast. I perused her purse and past the bottles and vials filled with strange liquids. I came across this cold, sleek silver body and brown handle. There were 3 bullets in the cylinder, and it weighed as much as half a pack of sugar. It was unlike the fake guns I had in my collection. It felt decisive, dangerous, dominant, manly. I imagined that the gun and I were in a white void. I shot the white nothingness. Bang, bang, bang. I just kept shooting. My grandmother snatched the purse from me, waking me from my daydream. As we had arrived, we entered the home without knocking, my grandmother announcing herself as we walked in. A crying Filomena welcomed us to the spacious living room. Her hair was a mess, as if someone had been pulling on it. Her left eye was a deep purple turning black, as she had a bloody gash on her right cheek. Filomena paced back and forth, trying to explain to my grandmother the situation, but she was hyperventilating. I managed to make out that her baby was not breathing after an argument with Pedro. A sudden gravity took hold of my heart. I looked around the living room and noticed there weren't any pictures of Pedro and Filomena or the baby, and that all the windows were closed. The air felt heavy and tasted like copper. My grandmother grabbed Filomena's shoulder, rubbed them up and down, and hushed her. My grandmother stared into her eyes with the look she gave me whenever I needed to calm down, when my anger seeped through my pores and the world wouldn't be able to take on my wrath. My grandmother asked for Pedro, and Filomena pointed to the room in the back. My grandmother frowned as she caressed Filomena's injured eye. We marched back to the room and found Pedro pacing back and forth in front of a crib, smoking a cigarette. Inside of the crib, their baby lay motionless, a deep shade of blue and green. A pit opened in my stomach through which my heart sank, and it swallowed up the baby too. There was blood around his head and welts on his arms. Pedro's eyes were desperate. He scratched his head with one hand and rested his other hand on his hip as he tapped the floor with one foot. My grandmother spoke no words as she started bringing out the bottles and vials out of her purse. She turned to me and instructed me to wait outside the house, in the car. I trudged my way to the car, pissed off and disappointed I would not get to see my grandmother work. Past the crying Filomena, who was now sitting on one of her couches, facing the hallway leading to the back room, thumbnail to her teeth. I sat in the passenger seat and began reading from one of the many books I left in my grandmother's car before dozing off from the boredom. Boom, boom, boom. Muffled cannon shots woke me. Moments later, my grandmother came out of the house running as if her life depended on it. She got in the car and sped off, the car kicking off gravel in its wake. We drove in silence for miles and miles, and I could tell adrenaline was coursing through her body because the veins and tendons in her arms were contracting and expanding. We stopped at a red light, and I finally asked her about Pedro and the baby. Staring at the Cordillera Central Mountains up north, she muttered, "To give life, you must take a life." She turned to me and told me that the baby was fine now. She then asked me if I wanted ice cream with a wide grin. When my grandmother finished her incomprehensible conjurations, she bathed the wife's belly in a reddish oil that smelled like peaches and lavender mixed with kerosene and sulfur. The couple paid my grandmother over pleasantries and began to walk in my direction. I let the beats of the curtains fall quietly and bolted out of there. This is the 50th couple my grandmother has given life to without having taken a life. Thank you.
Okay, thank you to all of our readers. We also had a lot of good pieces by authors who couldn't make it tonight, so go check out our fall issue online at helixmagazine.org. Submissions are currently open until December 14th and will reopen on January 9th for our spring issue. Also, please consider submitting to the 2022 Leslie McGrath Poetry Prize. Benjamin Grossberg is judging this year. There's a $10 reading fee for a $1,000 prize, so it's not a bad deal. Submissions for that close April 15th, 2022, and there should be a link to follow on your screen. So please check out these opportunities, and thanks everyone for coming.